I have a feeling no matter what I say in this video, I'm going to get chewed out by people on both sides either way, but overall I'm going to give it a shot anyway. When it does come to Donald Trump, he is overall one of the individuals that I do have respect for and overall support. If I was an American, I'd have more than likely definitely voted for him, but being British, I can't vote in an American election, so I couldn't, but overall I do support him. Generally, Donald Trump, he's very different from many of the other politicians and things like that we have today, leaders that we have today. And that's one of the reasons that I do have respect for him. When you have all the other many other politicians that are just very pro-establishment, elitist, Donald Trump seems to take a much more anti-establishment, anti-globalism, and more of a populist approach when it comes to politics. It's one of the reasons that he is usually heavily condemned by many other mainstream politicians, but it's also why many other working class people do have a lot of respect for him. Obviously, a lot of people don't like him, but also millions others do, however, support him, and I am one of those people. However, talking about Trump today, with what he's recently came out with, I will be honest when I say I have lost a little bit of respect for him with the recent things he said in a speech. Now, Trump recently had some things to say regarding the recent shootings that took place in, if I'm not mistaken, there was one that took place in Texas and another one that took place in Ohio. They were both very close together. They taken place over this last weekend, I believe. Now, one of the things when it does come to Donald Trump is, we need to understand this. We all know this already. When it comes to whatever the mainstream media says about him, you don't know whether to believe it or not, and a lot of the time you shouldn't. Because, let's be honest, there is an awful lot of fake news, ridiculous news about him, people trying to smear him, slander him, and things like that. And the way I kind of approach all of this fake news is a lot of it should not be believed. The way I overall look at it is you should only believe it if it actually came out of his mouth directly. And what I'm generally saying is people should do their own research on this, rather than just go by whatever the mainstream media says. I mean, for example, right here, here's a ridiculous article from the Washington Post, where they apparently say that one of Trump's favourite foods makes him have a Russian connection, makes him a Russian spy. It's a load of rubbish. It's fake news. Washington Post, get gone with you. It's news like this, which is why people generally don't believe a lot of the mainstream media, and rightfully no longer listen to the mainstream media as much as they may have used to have done. Fake news like this ultimately leads to even more support for Donald Trump, seeing as it is blatantly, it's utterly ridiculous. Now, there was recently an article I came across from Sky News. Now, I know Sky News is another one of these fake news websites, news websites, kind of a British version of CNN, really. But this is apparently what Donald Trump had to say. Now, for the most part in this speech, he does get a lot right. It's not like he's just blathering on about utter nonsense in this speech right here. For the most part, he does speak some sense. Where the problems start to arise in what he says is when he starts mentioning video games. I'll just play the clip right now so you can hear it for yourself.
In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul. We must recognize that the internet has provided a dangerous avenue to radicalize disturbed minds and perform demented acts. We must stop the glorification of violence in our society. This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence. We must stop or substantially reduce this, and it has to begin immediately. If we are able to pass great legislation after all of these years, we will ensure that those who were attacked will not have died in vain. May God bless the memory of those who perished in Toledo. May God protect them. May God protect all of those from Texas to Ohio. May God bless the victims and their families. May God bless America, thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, for the most part, talking about the video, he does mostly speak sense. He is predominantly right. Now, this article seems to have put a lot of words into his mouth, saying that he is blaming mental illness and directly blaming video games. He didn't seem to say that from what I heard in that speech. He just said that it can contribute to the overall problem. Now, that is the overall part where I disagree. The video games, now, overall, yes, mental illness, things like that, and hatred, and overall certain websites that do radicalize individuals into, carrying out violent actions, they are a problem. But are video games a problem? No, they're not. 99.9999999% of gamers are ultimately not violent individuals. Most gamers are not people that are going to carry out an attack after playing a violent video game. Overall, I believe video games are something that should not really have that much government interference. Now, I do believe that, certain governments, like the Belgian government, they are doing good things like stopping, in-game gambling, loot boxes, things like that. But overall, should the state, should governments be interfering into what kinds of games we should be getting, how violent games can be, things like that, the kind of messages they can have? No, I don't believe so. I believe that game developers, things like that, should have the freedom to make whatever types of games they want, regardless of how violent, because generally most people that play those violent video games are not going to reenact the things that happen in those games. Generally, a lot of this, has been said before by other politicians. Trump is not the first politician or first person to ever blame video games for violent actions to be carried out. Okay, over the years, maybe the last 20 years, since video games became more and more mainstream, more politicians are generally blaming video games, 18-rated, 18-plus video games, citing them as the problem whenever there's a mass shooting, just like they are here with the recent shootings we got over this last weekend. Generally, most gamers are people that just want to sit down, have a good time with their mates, maybe play some Call of Duty, GTA, something like that. It's just a known fact that video games and gamers alike are not violent people. Most of the people I know play video games. They're not violent people, they're nice people, great people. Does mental health play a part in mass shootings and violence? Yes. Do certain websites that aim to radicalize people to carry out violent actions exist? Yes. Should those websites be shut down? Yes. When those websites incite the hatred, they are playing a huge part into why we have this problem. I've seen a lot of people on the left as well generally blaming guns. Guns are not the problem, okay? America has a Second Amendment, and I believe they have a right to that Second Amendment to own firearms if they so wish, if they have clean history. That's the way I generally look at it. Is Donald Trump entirely wrong with what he said? No, I don't believe he is. But the part where he starts attacking video games, gamers alike, I believe that is where Donald Trump is wrong, because it's a known fact that most gamers are generally not violent, and most people that pick up a controller and play an 18-plus rated video game like Grand Theft Auto or something like that are not gonna, after 4 hours of playing GTA, just gonna decide one day that they just want to carry out a shooting. The people that carry out these shootings are people with serious mental health issues. The way I look at it is, if violent video games cause violence, incite violence, then so do violent films, so do violent sports and things like that, going by that logic. So after you've banned violent video games, are you going to start banning violent films too? Violent sports too? Overall, what I'm saying is the less government regulation, the better. Overall, people, what do you think on this? What are your opinions on Donald Trump's comments right here regarding the recent shootings that took place in Ohio and Texas over this weekend? Be sure to let us know what you think overall, on what you think on what Trump said in the comments down below. Okay, people, this has been Lord Flashheart. Be sure to rate, comment, favourite, share and subscribe, and I will see you again. Cheerio.